Welcome back. I watched Serendipity, a movie from 2001. A cute idea built on, self-centered and absurd behavior. I rated it 3 out of 10. It's absolutely ridiculous. Serendipity is one of those movies that's often mislabeled as a chick flick, quote unquote chick flick, and I love chick flicks. But in reality, it's something much stranger and much, much worse. This isn't a sweet romantic comedy, it's a so called romance about two deeply self centered people who emotionally cheat on their partners, romanticize impulsive behavior, and then blow up perfectly decent relationships all in the name of, quote unquote, fate. That is absolutely garbage. And the movie expects you to root for them. Well, I'm certainly not rooting for these people. The premise is simple to the point of being ridiculous. Jonathan and Sarah meet by chance one evening in a New York department store while both are already in relationships. They spend the night together flirting, well, flirting outrageously, skating, talking, and bonding. You know, that in itself is it's just weird. Flirting, I guess that's okay, kinda, but this is taking it to a whole nother level. Basically behaving less like, curious strangers and more like people actively auditioning each other as replacements. Then, instead of doing the adult thing and reevaluating their current relationships, they separate and return to their respective partners. So far, it's already uncomfortable and ridiculous and absolute to, well, to garbage people, really. But the movie doesn't stop there. Instead of realizing they might be settling in relationships that aren't right for them and ending those relationships honestly, the film turns their belief or their brief encounter into a multi year obsession. They cling to this idea that fate will somehow bring them back together, absolving them of any responsibility for the choices they're, actively making. That is ridiculous. So basically you're in a relationship and you're just waiting for fate to bring you back to a person, a random stranger you met one evening. I don't get it. I mean, the Bloomingdale scene sets the tone for everything that follows. They're playful, charming, and clearly attracted to each other, which is fine, I guess. And, if they were both single, but they are not. The movie frames this as magical chemistry when in reality it's just two people flirting shamelessly behind their partners' backs. Talking about serendipity, very serendipitous of them. Then there's the notebook and book gambit, the idea that Sarah writes her number in a book and sells it, or writes it on a dollar bill and lets fate decide. This is presented as romantic whimsy, but it's actually emotional cowardice. That's what it is. They're cowards. Instead of exchanging numbers like, adults and dealing with the consequences of their action and, their attraction and whatnot, they outsource responsibility to the universe. I hate that trope. That is just no. And the movie treats this as noble. Years later, when both characters are engaged to other people, the film doubles down on how awful this premise really is. Jonathan becomes obsessed with tracking Sarah down despite being days away from marrying someone else. I know, right? This isn't ridiculous at all. We're shown a montage after montage of him chasing clues, retracing steps, and indulging this fantasy, all while his fiancée is depicted as perfectly reasonable, perfectly supportive, and a perfectly patient woman. The same goes for Sarah. Her fiance is kind, stable, and clearly invested in her. Yet the movie positions him as an obstacle simply because he isn't, quote unquote, the one. I mean, this is absolute ridiculous to the nth degree. There's nothing wrong with him either. I mean, which somehow makes her eventual decision worse, right? The most damning moment comes near the end when both characters are literally on the brink of their weddings and decide then is the moment, the last possible moment they decide to chase after the person they spent one evening with many years ago. Think about that. Think about it for a second. They don't call off the engagements early, they don't have honest conversations, they don't wrestle with guilt or consequences in any meaningful way. They just wait until the altar is practically in sight and then they say, you know what, fuck it, I'm out. What? The movie treats this as triumphant, serendipitous, romantic. In reality, it's incredibly selfish, it's harsh, it's cruel, it's vile, it's no. These people don't grow, they don't learn, they don't take responsibility for anything. They simply follow impulse and call it destiny. The word fate becomes a convenient excuse for behavior that would otherwise be called immature and, like I said, cruel. Are we really supposed to side with characters who emotionally cheat for years and then abandon their fiancés at the last possible moment? What? No. Even on the basic storytelling level, the movie is predictable to a fault. Every twist is telegraphed, every near miss is dragged out. The third act stretches coincidence to absurd levels, stacking contrivance on top of contrivance until the entire thing feels more like a checklist of rom-com cliches than an actual story. Now, to be fair, and this is the only reason, like I said in the beginning, why I'm not giving it a 1 or a 2. Serendipity is easy to watch, while being very frustrating. The New York winter setting is pleasant. John Cusack and Kate Beckinsale have surface level charm, sure. The movie moves along with being aggressively unpleasant, and that's the only positive that it has going for it. But ease of viewing doesn't make it a good film. At its core, Serendipity is a movie that romances emotional dishonesty, treats decent people as disposable, and confuses impulsive selfishness with love. It's shallow, it's predictable, and morally hollow. And yeah, it's a fantasy that only works if you don't stop to think about what the characters are actually doing. So for me, that leaves it at a 3 out of 10. Nothing more deserved here. Not because this is a hard watch, but because once you actually think about it, it's kind of a horrible story wrapped in a glossy rom-com shell. And that's where I stand. I hope this review was helpful. Let me know what you think, and I'll talk to you in the next one. Bye bye.